What's going on, guys? Jim Surratt, Hammer Strength Conditioning, coming at you this morning. I posted a video earlier this week about bench shirts and was informed that the audio didn't work. So I recorded about 25 minutes worth of video. Audio didn't work. So what I want to do today is just get back on here and try to talk again about what I talked about in the last video. Obviously, I'm not in my gym. I don't have my bench shirts with me, but it doesn't really matter. We can still talk about bench shirts. Okay, so in the video that I posted that didn't have the audio, I talked about the differences between single-ply and multi-ply bench shirts, right? What are the differences? How do we manipulate or adjust each one? That kind of stuff, right? And so we're going to try to kind of recreate that today. Okay, so obviously the differences between single-ply and multi-ply bench shirts are, first and foremost, the number of layers, right? So a single-ply shirt is a single layer of material, polyester. Each company has its own different sort of material that they use. Like, so the Titan material is different than the F8 material, than the Overkill versus the Inzer, all that kind of stuff, right? So there's single ply, and then multi-ply is at least 2 layers, sometimes up to 3. You could probably do 4 if you really wanted to, but that's going to be very difficult to touch in. Multi-ply shirts are open back, meaning that they are not enclosed like a t-shirt, right? So a single ply shirt per IPF, like IPF, USAPL, and USPA rules have to be closed back. So a single ply shirt is more like a very tight fitting supportive t-shirt, whereas a multi-ply shirt is more of like a straight jacket with a Velcro strap across the back that anchors it in place. Okay. Single ply shirts tend to be tighter because they have to be in order to provide the same level of support as a multi-ply shirt. Now, again, polyester, as I've talked about before, polyester versus canvas, when it comes to material, polyester provides support and rebound via layering and tension as compared to just the structure of the fabric itself, right? So a polyester, let's talk briefs real quick, or a squat suit rather. Okay, so a polyester squat suit provides support and rebound through layering of the material, whereas canvas squat suit provides support, structure through the actual composition and structure of the fabric. Okay, and then obviously when you have, I'm not going to talk about squat suits. We'll save that for a different video. So single ply versus multi-ply bench shirts. Single ply shirts are much tighter fitting because again they have to be. So it's not uncommon to see somebody really squeeze into a single ply shirt and kind of be all bound up like this. Multi-ply shirts are still tight, but they're mostly tight through the sleeves as compared through the chest plate and the shoulders. Now, again, with the open back concept of a multi-ply bench shirt, it's easier to get into because you're not going to be able to pull a triple ply shirt over your head and get through it like you would a t-shirt. So you have to go into it like a straight jacket or like a vest, right? And then it anchors in back with a strap. Because a single ply shirt is more like a t-shirt, it covers the shoulder cap, right? It covers the deltoid, covers the whole shoulder complex. So because of that, it is less readily and less easily adjustable as compared to a multi-ply shirt. Now, what does that mean? Right? So in a bench shirt, there's the chest plate, okay, and then the sleeves are sewn either on top of or through the chest plate, and there's a thick collar that runs along the top of the shirt. Okay, so the collar and the chest plate is where the majority of the energy is stored as you lower the bar. Now, obviously, the sleeves, especially the back side of the sleeves, still takes a lot of tension and a lot of loading, right? But as you come down in a bench shirt, whether you tuck or flare, either which way, that chest plate stretches, and where the armpit is sewn from the sleeve into the chest plate, energy is stored across that line, right? And that's what provides the support on the way down and then the rebound on the way back up, right? Because as we talked about, gear works on the principle of deformation, restoration, or reformation, right? So the gear stretches, it deforms, it stores potential energy, and then that is released as kinetic energy as you press off the chest. Okay, so with a bench shirt, you can do what's called jacking the shirt, right? So if this is my bench shirt collar, if I jack my collar down or if I pull the collar down, it creates more tension across the shirt prior to the shirt being loaded with weight. Okay, so what happens with that is that it makes it more difficult to touch because the material is pre-stretched and more horizontal as compared to vertical, right? but it also provides more support, more rebound, and more pop. Now, again, because a single ply shirt is like a t-shirt, you can only manipulate the collar down so far, because as you pull the collar down, the back side of the shirt rises up and it kind of gets bunched up and you get in this weird hunched position, right? Whereas a multi-ply shirt, because in a multi-ply shirt, again, it's open back, right? And just has the Velcro strap securing it in place. The deltoid is just covered up front, but it is not encapsulated, right? It's not enveloped by the shirt. So if you look at a multi-ply shirt, there's usually like a little flange or fin that comes up off the side and then kind of wraps around the back of the shoulder. Now, because of that, that allows you to manipulate the shirt collar more effectively and more aggressively, because you can pull the shoulder cap down, you can pull the collar down, and you can create a more horizontal line of pull across that chest plate, across the armpit, and across the collar as you go through your eccentric portion or your loading portion of the bench. So with single ply, again, you can't manipulate it. You can't manipulate the collar as much. So how do we navigate around that, right? Well, one thing that I've seen and that I've done is as you pull the collar down, you push the pecs up, right? So that moves essentially flesh or muscle out of the way, and then it creates more surface area, right? More a bigger chunk of muscle, essentially. More mass, that's what I'm looking for, more mass underneath the collar. So it pushes the collar up higher, it creates more preloading stretch, and then it allows you to get more support and pop off the chest as long as you can touch with it. Again, with the multi-ply shirt, because those shoulder caps are free floating, you're able to pull them down more horizontally so that you have a more direct line of pull across the shirt. Right, so multi-ply shirt is much easier to manipulate when it comes to jacking the collar as compared to a single-ply shirt. However, like I said, the more you jack a collar, especially in multi-ply, the harder it is to touch. And what happens a lot of times is that people who are unfamiliar with how to jack a shirt or how low to jack a shirt over jack it. Right, they pull the collar too low because they think, oh, if I pull it really low, I get a lot of support, a lot of rebound, a lot of pop, which is very true, right? But what happens is the lower you jack the collar, the more weight it requires to touch. So what happens a lot is that guys will overjack their collar and that they can't touch with or they can't press. They can't, sorry, my brain just short-circuited. If they overjack the collar, it takes more weight to touch than they can press, right? So the lower you pull the collar down, the more weight it takes to touch, but you have to be strong enough to press out of it, right? So you'll see a lot of times like really strong benchers, they'll have a low collar, but they're capable of pressing that much weight off their chest, right? I'm not a great bencher. I'm about a 405 bencher in a multi-ply shirt. That's just how I am. And I can touch in 405 pretty easily. I personally like to let the collar ride a little bit higher because it's easier for me to touch. I don't have a big belly. I don't have a big chest, right? So I don't have this like big lump of mass essentially, or this high touch point because of my frame and my long ass arms. So I like to let the collar ride kind of high. That's just personal preference, right? But yeah, that's where a lot of times you'll see multi-ply benchers fail, is that they overjack the collar, they pull the shoulder caps too low, have too much horizontal pull across the chest, and they can't press what it takes to touch. So if it takes 600 pounds to touch, but you can only press 500, you're SOL, right? So again, single ply shirts are like a t-shirt. They're tighter fitting. They're more form fitting. They're more restrictive, right? Not by virtue of how many layers there are, but just how tight the shirt is in general. Single ply shirts are pretty uncomfortable, right? Whereas a multi-ply shirt, being open back, is a little more comfortable. Like, so I have a number of single ply shirts. I have Titan, Inzer, Overkill, and I had an F8 open back shirt, which I didn't really like, so I think I sold it. I also have a few multi-ply shirts. I have a 2-ply and a 3-ply F8. I've used an SDP. I've used the Titan Evil Twin. I've used an Overkill shirt. So I've used all these different shirts. And we're not going to talk about which one is best. That's not what we're talking about here. But with a multi-ply shirt, because it is open back, it is not as snug across the shoulders. So how do we navigate that? Well, in the back of a multi-ply shirt with its open back concept, there's a Velcro strap that comes across the body that secures the shirt in place, right? Now with most multi-ply shirts, you have just one strap running across like the mid-back, just enough to keep the shirt tight around the torso, right? Personally, I'm a fan of an upper back strap as well, because having that sort of flap here, this open, this uncovered shoulder cap area, you don't get as much tension across the chest plate. And that's why in multi-ply shirts, the collars tend to be thicker than on single-ply shirts, because they require more material to store that potential energy and then release it as kinetic energy, right? So again, this is personal preference as far as like how the shirt feels, how tight it should feel, or how tight it fits. But again, I'm a big fan of like an upper back and a mid back. I'm not a huge fan of the low back strap, because what happens, and this leads me to my next point, is that if you have a low back strap or lower back Velcro strap to secure the lower part of the shirt in place with multi-ply shirts, it limits how much you can arch up, right? Because that shirt is snug to your torso. It's going to limit maybe not how much you arch up, but how much you belly up, right? So in geared benching or shirted benching, because of the collar and the chest plate, you can't touch high on your body, right? You're not going to be effective. You won't load the shirt effectively if you have a high touch point and a wide flare. Now, sometimes in single ply, like at the IPF or USAPL level, especially like internationally, you'll see people with a wider flare. So like their elbows come out wide as compared to tuck. And Titan in particular makes two different cuts of shirts. They make an angled sleeve and a straight sleeve. Angled sleeve is more geared towards arched benchers, whereas a straight sleeve is more like a flat, wider flare. So again, it just comes down to personal preference and lifting style. But with the back straps, going back to the back straps, if that multi-ply shirt is too snug across your body, you're not going to be able to belly up effectively. You're going to have a longer or a greater distance to touch. And then that leads me to my next point is, what about belts, right? Do I wear a belt when I bench? Do I not wear a belt? How high do I wear it? How tight do I wear it? That kind of stuff. Again, personal preference, right? I personally don't like wearing a belt that much when I bench, because it limits, again, I don't have a big belly, right? It kind of looks like I do right now, but I don't have a big belly, so I don't have much of an arch when it comes to setup on my bench. So when you wear a belt, what happens is it constricts that torso, it constricts that abdomen, so you can't push your belly up as high, right? The good thing about a belt is that it anchors the shirt in place, because when you jack the collar, especially in a multi-ply shirt, when you jack the collar and let it ride down low, as you lay down and arch up, that shirt is naturally going to ride up, right? So it's you're creating less support, less rebound, less pop. But when you wear a belt, the belt anchors the shirt in place. So what happens a lot of times is, especially in multi-ply, guys will get the wrist wraps on, and then they will get the collar jacked down, or they'll swim into it and then get the collar jacked down, pull the shirt down so it's tight, they'll arch up so it keeps that chest plate in place, and they put a belt on around like their belly button. And then what they have to do is when they lay down, they have their handler pull the belt down so it's lower on the stomach, so it doesn't get in the way of the belly up aspect of geared benching. But you have to be careful when you wear a bench belt, because again, it is going to limit how much you can belly up and how much you can arch up, because it's constricting your torso, constricting your abdomen, and restricting that range of motion. Okay. But again, it all comes down to personal preference. Okay. Again, I don't personally like wearing a belt. I will sometimes do it if I feel like I need it, if I need to anchor the shirt, but it's not something I like to do. And then single ply versus multi-ply. Single ply shirts, because they're more t-shirt style, tend to be shorter, right? They're not long. Whereas like multi-ply shirts, because of the style or fabricator or manufacturer cut, tend to be longer, right? They're more of like, they're not like a dress or anything like that, obviously, but like they usually have like an extended length of fabric, like an apron, that allows you to really get in there, knuckle down, and pull the shirt down, and then put a belt on, right? So again, personal preference and style. But yeah, so single ply shirts, t-shirt style, much tighter, more constrictive, more restrictive when it comes to range of motion. Easier to touch in for the most part. Usually have to be sized smaller than a multi-ply shirt, because again, polyester works on the principle of layering. So if you only have one layer of material, you have to have more tension across the surface area of the material or across the shirt as compared to multi-ply, which is multiple layers at the same time stacked on top of each other, either laminated or sewn. Titan used to make, they don't make it anymore, but they used to make their Evil Twin, which was a pretty radical bench shirt in my opinion. I tried it. I didn't like the material too much. It was very stiff, didn't have much flex to it, not a whole lot of pop, but it was a pretty radical shirt. I know a lot of people had great success in that. And then like when it comes to shirts, you know, fabric also matters, right? So Titan's material in their Super Katana, their LCC, their Katana is much more rigid as compared to like the fabric used by F8 or Metal or Inzer and even Overkill, right? And then Overkill has their black line, which is a stiffer material. It takes more to touch. It provides more support. So if you're a stronger bencher and you require less rebound off the chest, like if your triceps and your chest are very strong, but you need support on the way down to guide that bar, the black line's great for you. If you're like me, who doesn't have super strong triceps and a smaller chest, something like the Overkill gray line might be more effective because it has supposedly, I've never tried the gray line, but from everything that people have talked about and what the website says and what the emails say and what Rudy says, the gray line is stretchier, so it stores more energy and it has more rebound, right? So if you need more pop as compared to more support, the gray line is the way to go. Okay. Overkill's a great company. I have one of their Single-ply black line shirts. What's great about Overkill is that it's obviously custom sized, so you just have to make sure your measurements are correct. Otherwise, it's not going to fit right, or you're not going to get out of it what you're hoping to get out of it. Inzer, their Super Duper Phenom, has been historically a pretty great shirt. There's been conversation in the last probably decade about changes in material, which is going to happen as material or fabric suppliers run out of stock, or the fabric is no longer produced or manufactured, or the threads aren't being manufactured, because really, you know, fabric is just thread woven together, right, or knitted together. So if that polyester thread is no longer being fabricated or manufactured, then there's no longer going to be that material available, right? The F8 material is pretty forgiving. It could be stiffer in my opinion. I have an F8 double ply ace, a triple ply ace, and then I just ordered a double ply jack just to try it out, give it a run. I'm that guy who's always like, I'm going to try something different. And really at the end of the day, for me, it's probably I just need to get stronger. But like I've talked about in previous videos, I have 2 herniations in my neck that pinch the nerve that innervates my left triceps. So my right arm is still very strong, but my left arm just doesn't work the way it's supposed to. Like I have full function. I can extend and, you know, do all that stuff. But like 405 is kind of my max right now because my left tricep just doesn't produce the force necessary. Because I don't really have so I'm not trying to flex here, but just so you guys can see. So like this head of the triceps on my left side, and like I'm very right-handed. Okay, but this head of the triceps is really underdeveloped and is very atrophied compared to this one, because this is the head on this arm that is affected by that nerve impingement, right? So I only really have like 2 heads of the tricep that are working at full capacity. So sometimes when I press, I don't get as much output out of my left arm as I do in my right arm, okay? So I'm always on the hunt for something new, something that's gonna work best for me, that kind of stuff. Because in my opinion, I can only get so strong with only 2 working heads of the tricep. So I'm trying to find the most efficient gear for me, okay? But again, hopefully this is a little bit helpful. Single ply versus multi-ply, personal preference, competition availability, that kind of stuff. Both have their merits, both have their pros and their cons. It just comes down to what you want to do. If you have questions about multi-ply shirts, like I said, I've tried pretty much everything. I've tried the Overkill red line. I have the triple ply F8. I've used SDPs. I've used the Titan Evil Twins. I've used metal jacks. So I've tried pretty much every brand out there. So if you have questions about multi-ply shirts, again, I'm not an elite level bencher by any means. I can't press a lot of weight. It is what it is. but I feel like I know my stuff when it comes to shirts, how to manipulate them, how to adjust them, which one might work best for you. And just because I can't press anything over 405 doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about. So if you have questions about multi-ply shirts, hit me up. If you have questions about single-ply shirts, hit me up. Again, I've used an Overkill black line single-ply. I've used a Titan Katana, LCC, and Super Katana. I tried some Japanese brand, which was interesting. It was like Oni or something like that. I've used the Inzer Rage X. And then the F8 open back single ply. Okay, so I've tried a lot of different stuff, so I have a lot of experience in different shirts. So if you have questions, feel free to DM me. You can hit me up on Instagram at HammerSNC. You can email me at hammersnc@gmail.com, or you can comment on the video below. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. Hopefully you learned something from it. As always, don't waste the pain.